Welcome back to That Part by 45 Lemons. I'm Verta.
And I am Na.
It,
And welcome back. Welcome back.
it's season two, episode two. And just like to be clear, we just made up the concept of season so that we could keep learning and growing. So, welcome to a new season, new energy, but always the same heart.
And we'll always have our heart first. And we are still learning, and we invite all of you to keep giving us your thoughts and ideas as we navigate this journey. So, from last time, we took some great ideas from people we love and people close to us. And we hope to give you all a little bit more today than we did the last time. And so, episode onwards and upwards. We did some
Yeah, like
adjusting.
exactly.
I
Yeah, like,
have, do you see my lighting? We're trying all types of different things.
and
Can you hear me?
like Erica Badu said. I'm an artist and I'm sensitive about my art. So you can give us feedback, but be with us. And so this season's very special to us. We reached out to Black women in our lives, the ones who love us and challenge us. They call us, they hold us down, and we asked them to pick the topics for the season.
And specifically, we asked if you were to be on a podcast and you could talk about anything, what would you talk about? And we got marvelous responses. And so every guest we bring this season is talking about what is special to them, what they've been going through, what moves them, what brings them joy, and honestly, whatever they want to talk about.
And we might have to have a season three because we got so many responses,
We did.
which
We
we're
really did.
super thrilled about. But just
Yeah.
like you, we are coming with fresh ears to it, right? Because we don't actually talk to them
Recording in
topic. We don't talk to them about their topic ahead of time. We sit with it and we talk to them like if we're talking to them in life, but we want you to have kind of our real-time unfiltered reactions and reflections as we have the discussion.
Which feels very much like that part. We're honest and personal about the people and things we care about.
Yeah, and like we said, we talked to people. One suggestion that we had was to try to get big name people, get the celebrities, but we want to center the big name celebrities in our everyday lives. So women who we think are extraordinary, who keep showing up for themselves, they show up for others, they show up for us, they're showing up for life, even when it's hard. I mean, especially when it's hard.
Especially when it's hard. And and if you've been with us since season one, you know that we hold space for conversations that live in the intersection of culture, identity, and the very human mess and fabulousness of it all. That's my word, is fabulousness, or any fabulous, fabulous, fantastic, fabulousness.
The F. I won't even go there. Um, and we've been really thinking about the fact that we're doing this as part of, our work and business, and we still care really deeply about how systems shape us. Um, you know, Honestly, how can we not in these times? So this season is really about the selves inside of the systems, right? Like how
Yeah,
we navigate some of the real stuff that's coming up in life. And there
yeah.
might be ways that it intersects.
And so each episode will start with Verta and Na, Na and Verta, talking through the topic and how it shows up in our lives. And then we're going to bring in a guest, one of the women that we chose to go through this a little bit deeper and as deep as they want to. It is their topic and they're free to do that.
Yeah. And we're not going to know everything about every single topic. And so we'll close with some of our own reflections about what we heard, things that stayed with us, what shifted for us, like after the conversation or during the conversation. And we might even bring it back next time because I've
Right.
had a lot of time to sit with our last episode. So some of that is actually really resonant for what we're talking about today.
And so today we're talking about something that touches everyone, but that most people don't really know how to talk about, and including me.
Grief. And not just the loss itself, but who you are after the loss. The after, if you will, in quotes, that nobody really prepares you for. The part where life gets divided into the before this moment and the after this moment. And the after is where you meet yourself again, or maybe for the first time in a lot of instances.
Because let's just be real, people show up for the moment They'll show up for the phone calls, the text messages, the food trains, the condolences, but the world moves on, and that is a tough thing
Yeah.
to navigate.
Yeah. When you're still sitting with the quiet, still figuring out who you are now. And I think that for me, grief, we're going to dig more into it, but it's not just always the physical, right? It's not
Mm.
just always a physical death that we
Yeah.
might be grieving, but there are these big moments. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you want to talk a little bit more about that? Or,
Well, I mean, one of the ways that this connected for me with when we talked to Jihan, right? Because it was like realigning with yourself after motherhood, there is
right?
a death of that old person, quite frankly, that is
Yeah.
happening. And
Yeah.
sometimes there was a part in the episode where you're like, yeah, we don't want to go back to our old weight. And I was like, girl, or our old bodies. I don't even know if you said old weight. I
Right,
was
right,
like,
right.
old
It was
bodies,
the old
right? It
bodies,
was the old
right?
bodies,
Well,
right?
yes, yes, yes.
And I was like, girl. However, we also talked about how, I mean, for me personally, I got more curvy afterwards, right?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
was, but there's still moments I walk by a mirror and I'm like, who is that girl, right? And like, who's that woman? Who's that person?
Right.
Because it's just a whole different thing. And there's, this figuring out who am I in this new? How do I embody this newness? And I think that embodiment is not just about how do I embody it because my physical body is changing, but I think with grief,
Mhm.
depending on the type of grief that you are going through or the thing that you are grieving, that
Yeah.
embodiment can happen in a lot of other ways. So that's like the moments that stay with me from that last episode and that I thought a lot about when I saw um, this topic.
Yeah. You know, a lot of us, especially Black women, grief happens in motion.
Mm.
And I mean, it's a little bit of that. We're expected to keep holding everyone together and down and everything together and down, even when we're breaking inside.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there was a moment in the last episode too where you like paused us to say, let's go back to this conversation about postpartum depression. And I
Hmm.
feel like that was to me that or considering what's happening for you, or just giving yourself the space, right? Um, I wasn't introduced to this word, but I was introduced to this word as it pertains to just how we live, and it was meander. I was in a session and we talked about like this meandering that happens. And I think with grief, you have to allow yourself the permission to
Yeah.
meander
Yeah.
afterwards, right? Because still performing strength, when actually what you need is softness, is if you're just going forward and not like resting in it, you won't even know.
You know, the topic of grief is a bit difficult for me because I have had a lot of grief in the
Mm.
last few years.
Yeah.
And when I saw the topic, look, I'm getting like a little bit emotional, but when I saw the topic, I was like thinking about how to get through the topic. But then I was like reading all the things about Darnese, which is like, okay, maybe she's going to help me get through
Yeah.
this topic.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. So were you going to say
Yeah.
something?
Yeah, I was gonna say, I feel like I've had moments, and as we get older, and as I get older, and my parents get older, which I'm, so fortunate to. That's a tricky thing. Fortunate to have both of them still here.
Yes.
Um, you don't think about what it's like I haven't yet had to think about that, but I've had friends that have been going through that. And as we hit this, when all of us, the Gen Xers of the world, are hitting a place in life where there's different types of loss that are happening for them. And so the topic is really huge. And that last bit that we were talking about still having to perform, still having to go to work in a time that we've talked about in previous episodes that is and has always been very difficult for Black women because of all the things and ways that we have to be in the workplace. And then add
Mhm.
to that you're potentially going through um, what it means to have a significant loss going on in your life. And so I am really excited about where the conversation can go and that it can potentially help people. Um, think more about what it means to rebuild, to redefine, and to allow a new version of yourself to exist, but allow yourself to meander through that process
Yeah,
again. Yeah.
yeah. When my father passed away, it was, and I don't know how to say this, but I didn't think I would be as gone as I was. You know what I
Mm.
mean? Like,
Yeah.
because you don't know how grief is going to hit you,
Yes.
and where it's going to come from. And so I have a story. It's a little bit funny, but it's a little bit, like just about what happens with grief. So, my father passed away and then school started for the kids, and we went to back to school night, and I went to back to school night. I did all the things that happen in the course of being a parent with
Yep.
young children and elementary school. And we went a whole year, and we were back at back to school night, and I'm sitting next to a friend who I think I sat with the year before. And so they're talking about all these things, and they get to this one part where they start talking about, I don't know, the Arboretum or the opening or something. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's so neat. That's so cool. I did not know that this existed. And they looked at me kind of sideways, and they were like, do you remember last year at this time when they talked about this? And I was like, I don't
Yeah.
remember. And it hit me in that moment that I had kind of walked through that year. Like
Mhm.
I hadn't been as conscious or as present or something through that
Yeah.
year. And I didn't even realize it. And so, I tell people all the time, when you have grief, I mean, it's never going to go away, but you have to at least give yourself a year of where things kind of fade out, where you're just really trying to hold it together.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Oh.
okay, we are going to have a break and come back with our very good friend, and many, many wonderful things we'll say about her on the other side. Thank you.
Welcome back. We are 45 Lemons in all the spaces. You can find us wherever you listen to podcasts. And I want to jump right in to introduce you to our very good friend, Darnese Daniels. She is a thinker, a healer, a guide whose work lives in the in-between spaces. She helps people make meaning of their experiences, moving through grief with joy, and come home to themselves. Darnese works especially with Black women, educators, and leaders, supporting them as they create new ways of being in spaces that they shape. And her practice bridges personal healing, organizational transformation, and deep scholarly inquiry. She is that girl.
And that girl on that part. And what, we love about her story that it's not polished, it would be the word that somebody might say. It's human. She's here because she's still showing up. And I live and love the piece of your introduction. This is on your LinkedIn page where you said that you think of your work as wounded soul doula work, supporting people as they well, you said supporting people as they move through breaking open and becoming. I love it. So welcome, Darnese.
Thank you, Verta. Thank you,
You're
Na.
so welcome.
Thank you for the invitation. It's a pleasure and an honor to be with 45 Lemons.
Well,
It is a pleasure and honor to have you. And so, as you saw, I was like a little breaking up in that last part and trying to hold it together.
Yes.
And so, let's start here a bit gently with what made you say yes to this conversation right now? What made you pick this topic?
So I thought about all the ways that I could go, when you all, invited me into your space. And I was like, oh, I could talk as a scholar. I could talk as an educator. I could talk as a leader. I could talk as a, former preacher. I could talk in all these different ways. And then I was like, but all those things had one similar kind of theme.
Mm,
And that theme was throughout my life, I have felt like there's always been this like breaking and then opening,
mm,
these like
mm,
major transitions, what I call earthquake moments.
Mm,
And it didn't matter if I was in my time as a musical theater major or if it was while I was moving through the last iteration of my leadership into my doctoral program.
mhm,
There's always this recognition that something breaks open and
mm.
dies so that
mhm,
something new can be born and come to life. And so instead of trying to pigeonhole myself, which is what I feel like I've
Yeah,
done my whole life, I was
yeah.
like, why not honor literally the place that I'm in? And that is accepting who I am, accepting what I do, and recognizing that it doesn't fit into any square peg or round
right.
circle.
Mhm,
Um, and because it's the two of you, it felt like the safest space to have this conversation
Mm.
for the very first time out
mm.
loud and in
Oh,
living color.
oh my goodness. I mean, what
Oh,
do you say to
Lord.
that?
Everybody have their tissue
Like,
ready. Um, I
so that's a
wanna,
thank you.
yeah,
Thank
it is.
you.
Absolutely.
Earthquake moments. So, and kind of want to hear a little bit more about that terminology, right? Like, why is that I think of the seismic shifts and all that stuff. Um, and, there's the moment of loss and then there's everything that comes after it. What do you think people misunderstand most about the after that earthquake moment?
So the first part, definitely seismic shifts, right? The world underneath us is always moving.
Mm-hmm.
There's no such thing as a sense of steady in the way that our brains make sense of it.
Yeah.
Mm,
So for me, earthquake is when that shift happens that causes everything that seems steady to be swallowed up by the earth.
Mm-hmm.
And that's essentially how I have experienced loss. I think about when an earthquake happens, what we've seen happen in California, that
Mm-hmm.
everything that we've known no
Mm-hmm.
longer exists.
Yeah.
Um, or there's like vestiges of the past that
yeah.
linger, but
Yep.
it's no longer what it once was. And what
Mm-hmm.
does it look like? To your point, when that happens, what does it look like? I think often about people who survive natural disasters. How do they start again?
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Right.
Yeah.
and I think for years I thought that earthquake moment means everything that has been destroyed can never be recovered. And my own healing journey has helped me realize that everything that was destroyed became an opportunity for something new. And so when I
Mm-hmm.
think about after the loss, you have to give yourself permission. I heard you all both talking about not saying give yourself at least a year to not have to dot, dot, dot.
Right.
I realized that grief gave me an invitation to reconsider why it was present.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm,
that invitation was to imagine myself in a new chapter of my life.
Mm-hmm.
And
mm,
nothing that existed before was ever lost. It just is in different form.
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
So when my mother passed away, you know, so much about what I've experienced in the Christian faith was that like she's gone forever until I meet her
Mm,
again in heaven. And
yeah.
grief came to me really clearly, really intensely to invite me into my mother is still with me because that which is spirit never dies. That
Mm,
would have not happened for me in a real, tangible way if I didn't accept the invitation grief was offering,
oh
which
my
took
goodness.
time for me to get to, right? Like to Na's point, it wasn't just a year, it's been years
Yeah.
of accepting the invitation. And each time I accept it, I get clearer and clearer and clearer.
That that
We're,
whole accept the invitation grief offered. I'm sorry, I just want to like you've said so
yeah.
many things and I'm trying to like take my little notes and do my little thing and we've got like places to go, but this thing around accepting the invitation that grief has offered, I just want to I just had to sit with that for a minute.
Yeah. I mean, in order to do that, are there things that you feel like you had to unlearn?
That's like the perfect question. Yeah. Yes, in many senses, I had to deconstruct my faith. I
Mm,
lost it, but all the ways that framed how I understood God, how I understood spirit, how I understood humanity was now turned upside down. It had been swallowed up. So
yeah.
either I like try to,
Yeah. It was
recover it
swallowed up like in the grief.
in the grief,
Mm.
Yeah.
in the grief. And the kind of deconstructing was allowing myself to unlearn all of the things that for so long had determined how I engaged with God, with humanity, with my own kind of soul journey.
Yeah.
And the unlearning was probably the most painful part because that
Yeah.
was sort of grief. I had to release and let go and accept what was nebulous for a long time until it started to take real shape and form. And
Right.
that meant taking risk at thinking differently, inviting other folks into the conversation around what their experiences had been, um, staying open to what would come
Yeah.
to me in ways that were more natural, understanding God through nature and water and sound, all these ways that for years I'd taken for granted.
Something that bubbled up for me with the whole, what did you have to unlearn and then unlearning is about how we kind of met, right? And this parallel experience of unlearning and deconstructing and decolonizing, right? So we met through a lot of work that was, anti-racism, anti-bias work, how to create spaces that were more healed than the spaces, than it was
Mhm.
before. And so I kind of have a question about this parallel of like, and then the other question was like, okay, you unlearning, how do I show up for all the other stuff? This whole job, this whole being a mom, this whole being a partner, like, come
Right,
on now. Like, I'm just one
right,
human out here. What you
right.
talking about? So I'm really curious about as you do this work, particularly because you're focused on Black women as
Mhm.
educators or whatever, like talk to us about what that looks like in your practice or in your work with people, this unlearning and how do you do that on uneven ground?
Um, on uneven ground. It's accepting that it's not like it's uneven, right? Like it's in sitting with people in grief is accepting that presence
Yeah.
is the hardest thing because nothing about it is stable or even or normal.
Mhm.
From one day to the next, that whomever it is, it started with myself. I felt
Yeah.
myself go up and down, and that learning and then unlearning that I needed to somehow be strong and have on my Black woman cape
Yeah.
Yeah.
opened up a portal for me to sit with other women in that the ground is uneven. It's not
Yes.
steady and it won't be for a while. So to offer presence
Yeah.
means to sit with people in that. And
Yeah.
to me that was the honestly, Bird, that was the greatest revelation. What does it mean to just be with somebody?
Yeah.
I don't have no words. I don't even know what to say. I'm gonna say the wrong thing. I'm gonna act crazy. Like
Right.
I'm a fool around and put my foot all the way down my throat, right?
Right.
But if I just be, my nervous system is steady, offering
Yeah.
steadiness to their nervous system, even though the ground is shifting.
Yeah.
I think that was the first thing.
Yep.
And in terms of, because I know you do that with women, can you talk a little bit? And we're going to go kind of all the way, but I do want to talk about your practice like holistically, because you do that with organizations too.
Mhm.
So, kind of, is there a difference in how you do it with people and women versus organizations?
So I think one of the only difference is one is if you're with a woman individually, that's one thing. But the women that I do it with, it's usually in collective in what I call sister circles. And
Okay.
my language around that is that Black women are medicine. If you have
Mhm.
too much dosage, you could, you know. But if you have too
Is there
little,
such a thing? Wait a minute.
Wait,
right,
wait a
right.
minute. You
See,
can't
that's the
OD
thing.
on Black women. What you
That,
talking
that's
about?
the thing I had to realize, right? Like, vitamin C is all day everything, but if I have too much in one day, too much dosage in one day, it's not bad for me. But can my body metabolize it? And so to
Oh,
recognize was that Black women come in with pain from Black women, hurt and harm
Oh,
from Black women. So to be medicinal means to understand dosage, to
Mm,
understand what kids call today microdosing, right? What did it mean in those spaces to be really careful about how I curated how women came in presence with each other? How do I create the conditions for curiosity
yeah.
and vulnerability? And
Hmm.
then how did I frame what it meant to ask of each other how to be present with questions that weren't interrogating, but were curious about that person's experience in the effort to learn some wisdom from what
yeah.
their experiences have to offer. And I think the same thing is true in organizations. A lot
Hmm.
of what I feel like I experienced is like slowing people down. Organizations
Mm,
tend to go really fast because they're product
Yeah.
driven, outcome
Hmm.
right.
driven. And because the work that I offer is that I'm not giving you a product. The
Hmm.
outcome is that you will show up differently. You will find a new way of being.
That's right.
Yeah.
And that new way of being means slowing down and
Hmm.
sitting with the things that are uncomfortable. So a lot of the ways I practically do that is simply asking, learning how to ask the right kinds of questions,
Yeah.
which means I have to listen not just from what's being said, but body language,
Yep.
read
What's
the
not being
room,
said?
what's not being said, what's
Mhm.
not being lifted or offered.
Yeah.
And that I feel like is like a practice I'm still engaged in, but really it's slowing people down by asking the question that pauses people, gets them to take a breath. And I
Yeah.
would say that organizationally, the only difference is it's usually around a problem of practice
Hmm.
versus some type of personal loss.
Yeah. So I think it's like I said, it's interesting because the work that you do, the work that we do, how we entered this, all of these kind of parallels speak a lot to me about how Black women carry grief differently.
Yes.
We're not always given the language for it, right? So what's something that Black women know about grief and rebuilding that
Mm.
you feel the world hasn't caught up to yet?
So I started with Black women in medicine and then joked about like, microdosing in that when I think about the pews that I sat in as a kid in church, the beauty salons that I sat in, um, getting my hair braided on the stoop, sitting in my
Hmm.
auntie's house. All of those conversations I wasn't supposed to be listening to and I was ear hustling, often about grief. They were often about grief. It was about the relationship,
Oh,
right?
Yeah.
It was about the loss of a job. It was
Mhm.
about a child that was being rebellious. It was all these experiences that they were talking about with such ease with each other, such comfort with each other.
Mhm.
No pretension, no putting on.
Yeah.
And that was the first thing is that when Black women have space to just share without the mask,
yeah.
something opens up. And the
Yeah.
second thing that I remember witnessing was a lot of laughter, that
Mm.
their ability to recognize the pain,
Yeah.
hold each other, touch each other's back,
Mhm.
Yeah.
just sit next to the person,
Yeah.
um, and then crack a joke. And that
Yeah.
that laughter would turn to tears, and that tears might turn to wailing. But
Mhm.
the release that came
Yeah.
brought them back to that same beauty salon
Yes.
every week. And I think the
Yeah.
thing that
Seems
we know
sacred.
is that, yeah, it's
Hmm.
sacred. It is a vulnerability
Hmm.
that we naturally get kind of groomed to engage with in
Hmm.
these spaces that we don't consciously think of as sanctuary. But that's what they are. Black women create sanctuary for each other. And within that, there's sacredness and there is laughter.
Hmm.
Let me ask, and I'm going to take this again. I'm continuing to shift, but we had, I had the pleasure of you visiting my homeland in
Mm.
Ghana, and there's something around this that also has to do with coming back from grief and loss. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, seeing you in Ghana, I think even now I got chills talking about it, was to one of the draws to you all were just one, how authentic and real and passionate you are about this work. But you're talking about Ghana and what it meant to both acknowledge the loss, but also like the power that you come from, this knowing of who you are that as a Black American, I didn't necessarily grow up with,
Mm,
Mm-hmm.
offered this opportunity for me to go and grieve what generations, for example, my mother, I feel like I brought my mother with me to grieve what she dreamed of doing, to
Mm-hmm.
release, to wail, to cry, and then to also see Blackness everywhere
right.
in
Yeah.
this way that I have never had the opportunity to experience.
Yeah.
So grief and joy lived side by side in Ghana in a way that was restorative and healing. I mean, on a cellular level, that I feel like when Black women can have that experience, it's one that I would encourage them to pursue.
Appreciate that.
So let's say there's someone listening who's still in the middle of it. They're still in the fog. Um, what would you want them to hold on to? Like, what is something, like from your practice? And I have a whole other thing, but we're gonna have to bring you back because I'm like, that's the thing I'm gonna go with right now. We'll see in a minute. Go ahead with that
Yeah.
one.
So, because I named like right, we both are loved by Black women, and because we love so what I say peculiarly, uh, yeah, y'all know what I'm
In
saying.
a
We
peculiar
know what you
manner.
mean. We know
But
what
Right.
I
you
wanted to leave it. I wanted to go ahead and do what I did to the language. That's right. Y'all know what I meant. In
Right.
a peculiar way. It's
Yeah.
peculiar because it is unfamiliar. It is
Mm,
odd. Um, Sometimes people mistake it for something. I think they conflate it with, sexuality and
mm,
Alice Walker talks about that, Bell Hooks talks about that,
mean.
that our love is so deep and so rich that in the same way we can wound each other and harm and hurt each
mm,
other more deeply than other harms or hurts. The thing I would
Oof.
say
Yeah.
is to really sit with yourself and think about, is there the presence of, whether it's an elder or someone from another generation, of someone who you trust, not with your story, but with your soul,
Mm.
mm.
and to offer them one small part of what loss you've experienced and where you are in that loss, not to get a response, but to get a
Mhm.
release. That's
Mm.
the thing I ask is there anyone in your life that you feel like you have the safety to explore that with? And if you don't, where is the point of healing? Where's the wound? Whether it's your mom or your grandmother, your sister or your best friend, that you can seek out, and I do say this to people, therapy, and I often offer the decolonized therapy that really centers the needs of Black women so that they can
Mhm.
come and begin to heal that wound, so repair can begin in new relationships. So for me, the in between is to sit with that question:
Yeah.
where did the wound begin? If it is not with Black women, then find one who you can share that with, just to
Mhm.
release. And if it is, seek help from, but with the people who have the gift and the skill to counsel you so that you can repair
Mhm.
that, because there's nothing like the love of Black women and the healing energy and restorative energy that we bring when we're just in presence with each other. And the lack of that can I think feel it can go unaddressed for so long. Um,
Mhm.
that I long for women to repair that. And I know each relationship is different, but I think that repair energy is one that can heal generations of harm and hurt that have come through our line.
Okay. We are up on a break and we are supposed to be done with you, but we're not. And so you're going to continue to join us for a few more minutes when we come back from this break.
Okay.
All right, fantastic.
Okay.
You're not putting a
Um,
whole wrench in the thing. Tell me what we
I
doing,
did.
girl.
We're just gonna come back and thank her. And, like if there's one more thing, is there one more thing, Darnese, that you want to
Yes.
say before you go? And then yeah. So that's gonna be the question. We'll kind of come back at just kind of give you an opportunity because I don't want it to end so abruptly.
Yeah, we got plenty of time. Still got like 14 minutes.
Right. That's what yeah. So let's do, yeah. What was the thing you want to ask her, Vernon? Is
Well,
it going to take too long?
I don't know. Well, yeah. Well, it was really like when you were talking about grief and loss, personal, and also the grief and loss that happens between Black women, it was just about how organizations fail us as
Mm.
Black women and
I
Yes.
think
how
you
we
should
were
ask that. Stop
forced to
that.
like,
Stop. Let's go ahead.
okay.
Let's record.
Okay.
Okay.
Mhm.
All right, we'll be out at 8 minutes past.
Okay. Welcome back to that part. We are here with our good friend Darnese Daniels, and we're speaking about grief and how you recover as and all the work that she does to help with that. So Verda had a question that was kind of burning, and we thought maybe we'd have to bring you back, and maybe we
Yeah, I
still
don't,
have to
and
bring you back.
we still have to bring you back. And I don't even know if
Right.
I'm going to be able to form the question, but when you were talking about um, grief for us personally, and then grief, the grief and the pain that can happen between Black women, it made me think about how organizations don't do a
Mhm.
service to us. And to
Mhm.
one, I think this gift that you're naming, because there's something that is innate, right, in who we are. And so I'm just, and also they don't acknowledge the huge grief, the huge losses like in organizations, and we tend to see it. We call it
Mhm.
out, we'll be a,
Mhm.
a person for it. So I just wanted to hear a little bit more about um these dualities
Yeah.
and also what you think organizations need to do, or how does your circle and the work that you're doing kind of fit into that space?
That is like the perfect question because that's the only reason why I went back to school,
Mm.
at this big old age with this hairy brain. Uh, make that make sense. Was because I realized that this work is not new,
Mhm,
right? What we're naming here is an epistemology. It's a way of knowing that
mhm,
at the end of the day, I feel like the opposite of what the reason why Black women have been able to, not, it wasn't policy, it wasn't
mhm.
DEI, it's because organizations know what we bring. They don't
Yes.
honor it through
Mhm,
pay and recognition, but they know what we bring. And
mhm.
that knowing is not something that can be measured by an output because the knowing, like you said, Berta, is innate.
Mhm.
And what I feel like happens is that's part of why I do this work is burnout, right? Because you're functioning on multiple levels, the dual consciousness that W.E. Du Bois talks about, but also that's still a patriarchal male perspective. We carry in our bodies um,
Yeah.
the
Yes.
things that we're witnessing, the things that we name, the things that we call out. We are natural carriers. We are the blueprint.
Mhm.
So if we are the mother of all
Yes.
creation, our innate ability to not only notice it, acknowledge it, but want to offer a way to heal it, move through it, gets extracted. So organizations
Mhm.
extract from Black women and then dispose of them. And so
Mm,
creates a whole nother level of what loss and grief feels like
Yeah.
because you're not honored for what you bring because you can't name it the way that
yeah.
whiteness names it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
However, you don't know how to turn it off because it is
Right.
so embedded
Innate.
that you be.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Exactly. It's a
Yeah.
way of knowing, it's a way of being. And
Mhm.
so part of why I do the work organizationally is because I say if you really want to heal your organization, bring Black women in the room.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To fire them is
Yeah.
ridiculous. Like your loss is exponential every time
Yeah.
you lose a Black woman. And
Mm,
that's not
Yeah.
an exaggeration. It's because you
Mhm.
can't account for the thing that you feel like is in the ether. No, it's in
right.
their bodies. It's in their knowing. It's in their history. It's in their ancestry. And no, I'm not going to put it in a spreadsheet because that's not how we move. But I
I
can
know.
definitely
No, I'm not
show
gonna
you,
make a
right?
KPI for that.
Exactly, exactly, right? But I can
Unless
definitely
it's
show,
joy. Unless it's joy.
unless it's joy, unless it's joy. But I can
That part.
definitely show you measurable outcomes in terms of how teams move differently,
Yes.
in terms of how people respond to our organization differently, in
Yeah.
terms of who asks the hard questions in the room and who
Mhm.
moves the thinking in the organization.
Yeah.
It's because we not only carry it, we witnessed it. And
Mm,
so what it means to
Mhm.
bear witness for an organization is something that most corporate organizations, nonprofits, don't have a consciousness of. And so that is
Mhm.
the number one reason why I went back to school is what does it mean to address it on an organizational level when Black women are constantly pouring out and not being poured back into? How
yeah,
do we pattern interrupt
Yep.
ourselves?
yeah,
But then how do we also make organizations conscious of the loss, their own loss, when they let Black
right.
people
Mhm.
go?
Yeah.
I love that. I mean, it's thank you for all of this. Thanks for sharing. Thanks for bringing up things that people don't talk about often.
Mhm.
And I do want to offer you because we do have to go. So sadly, we will have to be ending this, but is there anything that you would like to share? Like any, kind of any last thing that you want people to know to carry with this could be your vitamin C. We'll be doing our own later, but we'd love you to share that.
So I wrote a piece that basically was, where does the love go now? I think about grief as love with nowhere to land.
Mhm.
And therefore it offers us a place to search and to seek. And I guess the thing I would offer is this concept that we don't walk through grief alone, not just in the natural with having presence with a person, but we carry with us our ancestors. We carry their lessons from grief if we slow down long enough and we quiet ourselves long enough and we practice presence with self long enough. I believe they speak to us in the stories that we hold in our bodies, in our childhood, but also in the Ancient of Days. I
Mhm.
truly believe that. Um, I think it's a hard practice because there's so much noise, but I would invite every Black woman to slow down and sit with self and let your ancestors speak to you and let the
Mhm.
divine amplify it.
And where can people go
Amen.
to read that? Where can they go to find that and find you?
They can reach me at Substack. They go to my Substack. That's right. See, it's the joy, it's the duality, right? They can go to my Substack. They can go to my LinkedIn. My
Mhm.
Substack is tied to that. They can go to my Instagram. But all the ways in which I am living in the real now of it is the ways that you will experience me raw, still discerning, still determining, still exploring, but constantly returning back, like I did to Ghana, returning back to this place over and over again.
Thank you
Before we
so
let you go, I have to, I just realized as you were talking, and I was like really trying to think, because I don't want to misspeak and somebody's going to come for me and be like, no, don't you remember? And if not, I guess not. Do you know, I think you are my only American friend that I
much.
have ever been in Ghana at the same time with.
Wow.
I just realized that. And I was like, no, Verta. And I was like, no, Verta was in Ghana. She was with my family. I wasn't
Mhm.
there.
You were not there. Yeah.
And I was not there.
Hmm.
And
Oh my
so there are all these soul things that connect us, Darnese. And, we've talked about lots of them
Hmm.
in the past. And that is one of them. You are literally the only person from this part of my life that I have actually been in Ghana with. So that is dear, dear, dear. So Lifting Light and Love is her Substack. Her LinkedIn is Darnese Daniels. I want to say E because it's like, Spanish. Um, and Instagram, Darnese Daniels. Thank you so, so much
Thank
for sharing
you.
yourself with us today. We are genuinely blessed to have had you here.
And y'all, just so y'all know, like they think they can get rid of me, but the problem is I'm like a it's not it's I'm like the yeah, that's me. I'm the gnat. So yeah, it's
Who's
forever.
the they?
It's
Who's
a
the
soul
they?
tie. It's a soul tie. It's a soul tie. I love you all so much. Thank you
We
for
love
the
you so much too.
thank you so much.
Thank you, Darby.
Darnese.
Um, I have so much. I don't even know like what to do with my notes right now. So I'm going to need some time to process that, to metabolize it. But vestiges of the past that linger, accept the invitation that grief has offered, um, hold space as we don't know where anyone is on this journey. That's just mine. Like those other ones were words that literally came out of Darnese's mouth. And so for me, um, I think there are the big moments of grief, and you shared about you shared a story of one for yours, and there are the moments that don't seem really big until you're on the other side, right? So layoffs, losing a job, like there's a lot that, goes on with that, right? There's the grief that's often not acknowledged within the organization when
Right.
someone is let go or quits or is fired. Um, and then there's also like the process that you slash I go through and finding myself on this other side. It felt really timely because I am
Yeah.
finding myself on this other
On the
side.
other side. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I so appreciate so many things about Darnese. And I mean, I had chills a few times in the, moments of that. And I hadn't thought about the grief of being laid off either. Like it didn't even occur to me. I saw the topic grief and I thought something specific. And so as she was talking and talking about organizations and what they lose,
Yes.
and they do. And I've always believed that, but that was so well articulated.
Yeah.
Um, it gave me chills because I was thinking about, any time that that's happened for me and how I'm like, well, I mean, really, seriously, that's their loss. And
Literally and figuratively, their
literally and
loss.
figuratively, their loss. And so for her to really explain that to me, like, because
Yeah.
I've always felt it, but now I
Yeah.
like understand it.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's so much about what we as Black women how certain things have been extracted from us over time. And one of the things that is on the other side of this, and even seeing Darnese as she has transitioned into these different roles and the different work that she's doing, is that there is a reinvention that, if we allow it, can happen after that. And
Right,
I think that, or even not a reinvention, it's like, oh, this is what I always wanted to do. And
right.
so there's just some beauty in that. And so we're not supposed to always go back to who we were, right? You're meeting you where you are right now.
Yeah. And it's the best.
Yeah.
So, that part um, is that grief doesn't mean you're broken.
Hmm.
It means you've been opened. So thank you, Darnese, for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't wanted to process any of my grief out loud, and I still don't. I'm
Hmm.
still processing. And
Hmm.
maybe I never will want to, but I will say that the grief that I've had has made me grow, and this whole celebration of life has
Hmm.
become greater and bigger with every grief that's been
Yeah.
there. And so, I'm always like, let's go do the thing. Whatever the thing is, whatever the thing you want to do, let's go do that.
Yeah. And we don't know how we will grieve until we actually do it.
Yeah,
That's where I'm going to leave it. And so I'm going to just say my little dose for today is you're allowed to redefine what full looks like for yourself.
that part.
That part.
Have a great day.
Bye, y'all.